Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania is, to say the least, very disappointing. And because of this, let's go back. Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania is a movie that's been met with some mixed reviews. While some have praised its action sequences and comedic elements, others have found it to be a very boring film. We could say that this is mostly due to the lack of character development or just slow pace in the plot in general. Whatever the reason may be, it's been made very clear that Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania just isn't as exciting as other Marvel films. That being said, there's also some other interesting aspects to make this movie worth watching, and that's what I'll mostly be talking about today. To begin, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania has a very slow start. Not only that, one of the biggest problems in this movie is Janet Van Dyne, and she basically shows one of the biggest tropes in fiction, which I hate the most, which is the we don't want to say anything, but we kind of have to imply what it is trope. While I did like how her getting mad at Cassie's experiment was to build up Kang, I think it's a little overdone, and it just gets really annoying when she just keeps saying, I'll tell you later, I'll tell you later. It's like this repetitive cycle of it's just very annoying. This, mixed with the very slow pacing, makes her a very uninteresting spectacle to say the least. Her basically sitting there and implying that Kang already there is fine, but the fact that we already know that Kang is the big reveal kinda just drops any expectation that we're supposed to have. Now, another thing that I'll go over that I basically liked about the movie was Cassie. I think that Catherine Newton did a really good job showing Cassie's dynamic with Scott, and I feel like if she wasn't in this movie, Scott's character would have been severely damaged. Basically because the energy she brought when presenting her dialogue and her dynamic with Scott kind of just made up for any bad pacing or just bad dialogue in general. And she was more important to the overall plot than Scott was. She was connecting with the people down in the quantum realm and basically inspired them to start the revolution. So because of that, and I know you guys might get a little mad about this, I think that this movie should have been more about Cassie than about Scott Lang. Like, if I showed someone this movie who hadn't watched any Ant-Man films before and didn't know who Scott Lang was, they'd be under the assumption that yes, Scott is one of the main characters, but Cassie's also right there next to him. She's more of the center focus than Scott when it comes to the actual plot itself, and I feel like if it was more about her, then we'd be able to get better character dynamics and overall just dialogue. And lastly, the thing that I liked about Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania a lot was the post-credit scene, and spoiler warning in 3, 2, 1, go. How it leads into Loki season 2. And if you watch Loki, you would understand how it would lead into this movie as well. Kang in Loki is actually a very good character, and his presence allows for the show to have a really good narrative payoff. So when you look at the end of Loki and see Sylvie's choices have direct consequences leading up into this film, it all ties back together really well. Now that we've gone into things that I like about the film, I might as well talk about the things that I didn't like. Well, first, I didn't like the pacing at all, and I'm pretty sure I made that very apparent. The movie is very boring until Kang finally arrives, and it's kind of just like a snooze fest in total. We do get to learn a lot about the quantum realm and the people inside of it, but eventually we don't really care for them, as when Kang arrives, he basically just steals the show. Jonathan Majors' acting is actually really good in this movie compared to Paul Rudd, which I'm about to get into, and it feels like the screenwriters were only trying to give Kang good dialogue because everybody else besides Kang and Cassie really just say a lot of dumb, repetitive stuff. For example, Hank Pym. Hank Pym has been one of the most disrespected characters in this entire franchise. If you've read the Ant-Man comics, you would understand that Hank Pym is actually a very cool character who is very relatable on a surface level. He has a lot of problems internally as a human and a person in general that allows him to be one of the more compelling characters in Marvel. Hank Pym barely has anything to say in this movie, and not only that, his whole is just kind of useless. And it would have been much better if he didn't get put in the quantum realm with them. The only thing that Hank Pym does that's significant to the film is bring up the giant ants, which are basically just used to kill Kang in the end. But it feels like more or less he doesn't have anything to say. And now the next thing I'm going to talk about is kind of like an overall MCU criticism, but the jokes aren't funny, they don't land, and they need to stop making jokes in these type of movies. Now, for people that have seen any of the Thor movies at all, you guys would understand what I mean. Thor 1, 2, and basically most of 4 is just full with a lot of cringe-inducing, horrible jokes. It fit well with Thor 3 because they were more or less trying to make a story based off that type of humor and that lighter tone. But with Thor 4 and Thor 1 and 2, they were more darker tone movies that had a lot of very bad pieces of humor incorporated into them. And sadly, they just had to be carried over to the Ant-Man and the Avengers movies. And I feel like just in general, Ant-Man is a character that's better as a side character and not really a main character. As a main character here, it seems like they're just forcing to get something out of him, which doesn't work at all. Take a Marvel character who's meant to be the center focus of a story and then make him around something related to Kang. More like a Thor, or even like, you know, I was gonna say Spider-Man, but no. What is Spider-Man really gonna do to Kang? Shoot webs. He's gonna shoot webs. And with this, I feel like Kevin Feige is just neglecting his bigger characters to focus on his smaller ones, and he's still treating it like it's the beginning of the MCU. We've already gone through the process of having to introduce the smaller characters and make them into bigger characters. Since Thanos is gone, a lot of these characters' story arcs are pretty much complete. So instead of Thor going up against someone like Gore the God Butcher, he can go up against Kang, and not only will it be a good challenge and test for us to see where Thor really is, but he can also be a good test for Kang, so we can build up hype just like how we built up hype with Thanos. Beating up Ant-Man is not something that's going to get us hyped for the overall storyline behind this saga. We expect Kang the Conqueror to beat up Ant-Man. Ant-Man is a guy who shrinks and then gets big again. He has no type of real superpower. It's just all tech. When we look back and see how Marvel was able to build the hype for Thanos by post-credit scenes and teases through movies like Age of Ultron and the Avengers, it makes it hard for me to believe in my big head that they couldn't just take that blueprint and just do it again. They already had the He Who Remains already talk about his variants and how powerful they were and how evil they were. And then basically they have the nerve in this film for Kang to say, well, I've killed many Avengers, like the guy with the hammer. He says, I've already slain Avengers who are way stronger than you, so why are you gonna be any challenge towards me? And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. How is Ant-Man gonna defeat Kang? And he ends up doing it anyway. Towards the end of the film, Kang loses to Ant-Man. Ant-Man, like, it's ridiculous. And Wasp, they waste Wasp's character a lot, and she's not even focused on like that at all in this movie besides the beginning. This is supposed to be an Ant-Man and the Wasp film, and this feels just more like a Kang the Conqueror movie. If they wanted to do something like this, they might as well just made a Kang origin story, because this is basically what it is, and it just shies away from the people in the title of the movie. And it just feels like Kang the Conqueror Quantumania, because that's what it is. The truth is, Kang shouldn't have been the villain of this movie in general, and they've already wasted his character, and I'm really not hyped for any future Kang appearances. I feel like I'm done with the MCU, and I've lost all hope. And don't even get me started on MODOK. You know what? I'm not even going to talk about MODOK, but all I'm going to say is that the VFX suck. He sucks. His dialogue is cringe. Nothing about him is interesting. Nothing about him at all. Anything regarding MODOK and Darren Cross has just been ruined. I really liked him in the first Ant-Man, but here he's just horrible. He sucked. So in conclusion, we have a very slow-paced film, boring movie in general, horrible dialogue, characters who don't really matter at all to the overall plot, who are supposed to be central characters, and lastly, a villain who we're supposed to have all this hype for the overall story of phases 5 and 6. And now it's ruined. Whoever wrote the screenplay is an idiot. Well, I know Paul Rudd is trying his best as Ant-Man to deliver something. His script is horrible, so he doesn't really have a lot to work with here. And you know, with that being said, I think I've said my piece, and Auden out, man. This movie sucks.